Jason's boots scraped against the gravel driveway as he stared up at the sprawling estate that had been thrust into his lap. The last thing he'd expected when his uncle died was a property inheritance, let alone something out of a gothic fever dream. He muttered to himself, "Just what I needed. A haunted house to go with my haunted finances." Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint metallic tang of neglect. The labyrinthine halls seemed designed to confuse rather than welcome. Jason tripped over a loose floorboard, catching himself on a faded velvet armchair. "This is going great," he grumbled. Hours passed before he stumbled into a hidden room, concealed behind a sliding bookshelf. It was nothing like the rest of the house. Walls gleamed with alien metals, faint lights blinked along strange consoles, and at the center stood a sleek pod, emitting a soft, rhythmic hum. "Okay, this is officially weird," Jason said, half expecting cameras to pop out and reveal he was the victim of some elaborate prank. The pod hissed and began to open, releasing a burst of cold vapor. Jason stepped back, heart pounding as a figure emerged. A woman, tall and ethereal, with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Her eyes opened, glowing faintly as they locked onto his. "Master?" she said, her voice melodic yet cautious. Jason froze. Nope. Definitely not." She tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "You awakened me. That makes you my master." Jason waved his hands frantically. No, let's rewind. I didn't wake you on purpose. I was just exploring?" Her expression shifted, a flicker of amusement crossing her face. "Exploring your own property? How bold." Jason blinked. "Wait, you're joking." "I've been dormant, not dead," she replied dryly. "Humor is an advanced skill. I'll try not to overwhelm you." Jason couldn't help but laugh, though it was tinged with nervousness. "Okay, so, who are you? And what is this?" She stepped out of the pod gracefully, her movements fluid and almost too precise. "I am Alara, a bioengineered servant designed for, well, whatever my master requires. As for this," she gestured at the room, "it appears to be a repository of alien technology." Jason rubbed his temples. "Great. Alien tech, secret vaults, and now I've inherited you?" Alara raised an eyebrow. "You say that like it's a burden. It's just unexpected." Alara's gaze softened slightly. "Unexpected for me as well. My last master was different." Jason caught the shift in her tone but decided not to press. "Okay, Alara, here's the deal. I don't do the whole master thing. Let's just figure this out together. Deal?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Deal. But if we're partners, you'll need to prove yourself." Jason smirked. "Oh, I'll prove myself, just as soon as I figure out what's going on here." "Confidence," Alara said with a hint of a smile. "Let's see if you can back it up." They turned to the consoles, the mysteries of the vault and each other just beginning to unfold. Jason stood over the console, trying to make sense of the alien glyphs glowing softly on the screen. He tapped a few buttons cautiously, half expecting something to explode. Nothing did, but the glyphs began shifting rapidly, rearranging into something almost intelligible. "Okay," Jason muttered, leaning closer. "This is either a welcome message or an intergalactic eviction notice." Alara stepped beside him, her presence commanding without effort. "Let me," she said, brushing him aside. Her fingers moved across the console with practiced ease, the symbols responding instantly. Jason crossed his arms, impressed despite himself. "You seem oddly comfortable with this for someone who just woke up." She didn't look up. "I was programmed to interface with systems like these. It's second nature, like breathing." "Convenient," Jason quipped. Alara shot him a sidelong glance. "Would you prefer I let you fumble for hours instead?" He raised his hands in mock surrender. "No complaints. Carry on." The console emitted a low hum, and a holographic projection flickered to life. Jason stepped back as an image of an older man appeared. His uncle. The man's expression was grave, his voice crackling slightly as he began to speak. "If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone," the hologram said. "And it means you've discovered the vault. Good. You'll need it." Jason frowned. "Need it for what?" The hologram continued. "What I'm about to tell you might seem impossible, but you must believe me. Humanity is no longer alone in the universe. I've spent my life preparing for the day they'd come for us. Alara is the key. Protect her at all costs." Jason glanced at Alara, who was staring at the hologram with a mixture of shock and something he couldn't quite place. Pain? Recognition? The projection fizzled, then resumed. "This estate contains everything you'll need to understand the threat and how to fight it. But be warned, others will come looking for her. They'll stop at nothing to take her back." The hologram ended abruptly, leaving an uneasy silence in its wake. Jason exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "So, let me get this straight. My uncle was working with aliens, Earth is apparently under threat, and now I'm supposed to protect you from, what? Galactic repo men?" Alara's jaw tightened. "It's not a joke, Jason. If what he said is true, you're in far more danger than you realize." "I didn't sign up for this," Jason protested. "You think I did?" Alara shot back, her voice sharper than before. "I was created for this. I've spent my existence being passed from one master to the next, with no say in my own fate. Now I'm here with you, and for some reason your uncle thought you were up to the task." Jason held up a hand. Okay, I get it. You've had it rough. But I'm not exactly a superhero here. I don't even know where to start." Alara's gaze softened slightly. "We start with what we have. This vault, this technology, me. But if you're going to keep me safe, you'll need to step up." Jason opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. She was right. As overwhelming as it all was, he couldn't ignore the weight of his uncle's message, or the look in Alara's eyes. "Fine," he said at last. "We'll figure this out, together." Alara nodded, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. "Together, then." Jason turned back to the console, determination hardening his expression. "Let's see what other secrets my uncle left behind. Something tells me we're going to need all the help we can get." The next morning, Jason woke to the unmistakable sound of things crashing in the distance. Bolting upright, he groaned as he remembered where he was. His uncle's cryptic estate, complete with alien tech and an enigmatic alien woman who, based on the racket, wasn't exactly settling in. Quietly, he followed the noise to the hidden room, now alive with lights and motion. Alara stood in the center, dismantling what looked like a drone made of shimmering metal. Sparks flew as she pried pieces apart with her bare hands. "Good morning to you too," Jason called out, rubbing his eyes. She didn't stop. "Good morning. I'm securing the perimeter." Jason blinked. "By tearing apart, whatever that is." "It was surveilling us." Alara dropped a charred piece of the drone to the ground. "A standard reconnaissance unit. Someone knows I'm here." Jason stared at the pile of wreckage. "Reconnaissance unit? From who? Why?" She fixed him with a serious look. "The Syndicate. They're the ones who created me, and they don't let their property go without a fight." Jason ran a hand down his face. "Of course. This just keeps getting better." Alara ignored his sarcasm and walked over to the console. "We don't have time to waste. If they've found me, they'll send more. Stronger ones. We need to prepare." Jason followed her to the console, his frustration mounting. "Prepare how? I can barely operate a microwave, and you want me to outsmart an alien syndicate?" Alara gave him a flat look. "You're resourceful. You managed to inherit a galactic mess. Surely you can handle a bit of strategy." "Wow, thanks for the vote of confidence." Jason shot back, though he couldn't help smirking. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "We'll start with the vault. Your uncle didn't just leave you a mess, he left tools. I can show you how to use them." Jason sighed. "Great. Alien boot camp, just what I needed." Alara activated a section of the console, and a hidden panel slid open to reveal a cache of sleek devices. One caught Jason's eye, a wrist-mounted gadget glowing faintly with blue light. "What's that?" he asked, pointing. Alara picked it up, strapping it to her arm. "It's a personal defense unit. Shields, scanning capabilities, minor weaponry. Basic survival gear for, well, people like me." Jason frowned. "And what do I get?" She tossed him a smaller device, which he barely caught. "Training wheels." "Training wheels?" he repeated indignantly. "What am I, 5? "You're human," Alara said simply. "It's calibrated for someone with your limitations." Jason glared at her. "I liked you better when you were still in the pod." She ignored him, already focused on the console. "The Syndicate's units don't work alone. If this one found us, more are likely en route. We have a few hours at most." Jason groaned. "So what do we do? Fight? Hide?" "Both," Alara replied. "We use the estate's defenses to buy time while we figure out our next move." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Defenses? This place has defenses?" Alara turned to him, a spark of amusement in her eyes. "Did you think your uncle was just eccentric? He fortified this estate to withstand an alien." As they moved through the estate, activating concealed panels and setting up protective measures, Jason couldn't help but notice how seamlessly they worked together. Despite her sharp tongue and commanding demeanor, Alara wasn't as cold as she seemed. She occasionally glanced his way as if gauging his resolve, and each time he met her eyes, she looked almost impressed. "Why are you staring at me?" she asked suddenly, not looking up from a console. Jason shrugged, caught off guard. "Just wondering how someone like you got stuck with someone like me." She paused, her expression softening. "It wasn't my choice, but it could have been worse." Jason grinned. "Wow, don't get all sentimental on me now." Alara rolled her eyes. "Focus, Jason. The next wave could be here any minute." "Right," he said, though he couldn't shake the feeling that beneath her hardened exterior, Alara was just as scared as he was. As the estate's defenses powered up and the first ominous sounds of approaching drones echoed in the distance, Jason took a deep breath. "Here goes nothing." Alara glanced at him, her voice steady. "Stay close to me. We've got this." For the first time, Jason believed her. The estate fell into a tense silence, broken only by the distant mechanical hum of approaching drones. Jason and Alara crouched behind a heavy stone wall near the estate's perimeter. The alien defense, systems humming faintly around them. "You sure this is going to work?" Jason asked, gripping the small alien device she'd tossed him earlier. It felt like holding a piece of lightning, buzzing faintly in his palm. Alara didn't answer right away, her eyes scanning the horizon. "It'll hold them off for a while, long enough for us to figure out a real plan." "Great," Jason muttered. "So we're basically stalling until we're inevitably overwhelmed. Love that for us." Alara's lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. "You complain a lot for someone still breathing." Jason opened his mouth to retort, but a flash of movement silenced him. From the tree line, sleek, metallic drones emerged, their surfaces glinting under the pale morning light. Each moved with eerie precision, their elongated limbs bristling with weaponry. Jason tightened his grip on the device. Alara? I think they brought the A-team." "Stay behind me," she ordered, stepping forward. The wrist-mounted gadget on her arm flared to life, casting a shimmering shield around them. "Not a problem," Jason muttered, ducking lower. The first drone launched a salvo of energy bolts, which slammed into the shield with a deafening crack. Alara didn't flinch, her focus razor-sharp as she raised her free hand. A pulse of blue light erupted from her palm, striking the nearest drone and sending it spiraling to the ground in a smoking heap. Jason gaped. "Okay, that was terrifyingly cool." "Focus!" Alara snapped, deflecting another volley of fire. "Your device isn't just for decoration. Use it!" Jason fumbled with the device, pressing random buttons in a panic. A beam of light shot out, narrowly missing a drone, and instead obliterating a section of the estate's hedge maze. "Oops," he said sheepishly. Alara groaned. "You're lucky I don't have time to yell at you." The drones advanced, their movements relentless. One managed to flank them, firing at an angle that forced Alara to drop her shield for a split second. Jason reacted on instinct, throwing himself into the drone with a wild yell. The move was less effective than he'd hoped. He bounced off the drone with a grunt, landing awkwardly on the ground. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" Alara barked, pulling him up with surprising strength. "Just—" Jason gasped, wincing. "Trying to help." She shoved him behind her again, her expression equal parts exasperated and concerned. "Help smarter, not harder." Before he could respond, a deep, mechanical voice boomed from the drones. "Surrender the asset, and your termination will be swift." Jason swallowed hard. "Well, that's not comforting." Alara's jaw tightened. "Ignore them. They're programmed to intimidate." "Yeah, well, mission accomplished," Jason muttered. Alara raised her arm, sending another pulse of energy that tore through two more drones. "I've got this. Just stay alive." Jason watched her in awe as she moved with precision, dismantling the enemy with ruthless efficiency. But as impressive as she was, the sheer number of drones was overwhelming. He knew they couldn't hold out forever. "Alara," he said urgently, "this isn't sustainable. We need another plan." She didn't look at him, her focus unwavering. "The defenses are buying us time. The vault contains something that can end this fight, but I can't access it while we're under attack." Jason hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. I'll get to the vault. You hold them off." Her head snapped. Toward him, her expression hard. "You won't make it. They'll cut you down before you get halfway there." "Maybe," Jason said, his voice steadier than he felt. "But if I don't try, we're both toast." Alara's eyes searched his face, something unreadable flickering in her gaze. Finally, she handed him a small device. "This will give you a 10-second cloaking window. Use it wisely." Jason took it, his hand brushing hers for the briefest moment. "Thanks. Don't die while I'm gone, okay?" Her lips quirked into a wry smile. "I'll try to contain my disappointment if you survive." Jason grinned despite the chaos, then bolted toward the estate. Behind him, Alara turned back to the onslaught, her shield flaring as she faced the drones alone. "Be safe, Jason," she murmured under her breath before unleashing another devastating attack. The drones surged forward, their relentless advance unyielding. Jason didn't look back. For the first time in his life, running wasn't about escaping. It was about fighting for something worth protecting. Jason sprinted through the estate, heart pounding as the sound of battle grew faint behind him. The cloaking device activated with a faint shimmer, his form blending into the surroundings for a precious 10 seconds. It wasn't long, but it was enough to slip past the drones that had breached the outer defenses. "Okay, Jason," he muttered. To himself, his breath ragged. "Find the vault, grab whatever miracle is in there, and don't get vaporized." The estate seemed endless, its sprawling halls filled with alien tech and cryptic artifacts. Jason cursed his uncle's fondness for secrecy. "Could have left a map, old man." As if in answer to his frustration, the wrist-mounted device Alara had given him beeped. A glowing arrow appeared, pointing him toward a section of the estate he hadn't explored. "Thanks, tech gods," he muttered, following the guidance. The arrow led him to a reinforced door embedded in the wall, its surface etched with alien symbols. Jason hesitated, his hand hovering over the console. "All right, Uncle. What's behind door number 1? The symbols on the door glowed faintly as he placed his hand on the panel. A low hum filled the air, and the door slid open, revealing a chamber bathed in soft blue light. Inside, a pedestal stood at the center, holding a single object. A sleek, obsidian sphere that seemed to pulse. With energy, Jason approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. "Please don't blow up," he whispered, reaching out to touch it. The moment his fingers brushed the sphere, a surge of energy coursed through him. Images flashed in his mind, a galactic map, symbols he didn't recognize, and the unmistakable image of Alara. Her face was different, softer, younger, but it was her. The vision ended as abruptly as it began, leaving Jason breathless. What the hell was that? He didn't have time to dwell on it. The estate shook violently, and the sound of an explosion echoed through the halls. Jason grabbed the sphere, tucking it under his arm as he turned to leave. The moment he exited the vault, a drone appeared at the far end of the corridor, its glowing eyes locking onto him. "Great!" Jason groaned, breaking into a run. The drone fired and Jason dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a blast that scorched the wall behind him. He fumbled with the cloaking device, activating it just in time to disappear from sight. The drone hesitated, scanning the area. Jason held his breath, inching away as silently as he could. As soon as the cloaking wore off, he sprinted again, adrenaline propelling him forward. He burst back into the main courtyard where Alara was still holding her ground. "Jason!" she shouted, relief and frustration mingling in her voice. "I got it!" he yelled, holding up the sphere. Her eyes widened. "You actually—" Before she could finish, a massive drone, larger than the others, descended from above. Its weapons bristled with energy, and it aimed directly at Jason. "Get down!" Alara screamed, diving toward him. Jason hit the ground. As the drone fired, its blast narrowly missing them both. Alara rolled to her feet, grabbing the sphere from him. "Stay back!" she ordered, her voice fierce. Jason watched as she held the sphere in both hands, her eyes glowing faintly as she seemed to connect with it. The air around her shimmered, and the sphere pulsed in response. The massive drone hesitated, as if assessing the sudden shift. Then, with a deafening roar, it unleashed another attack. But Alara was faster. The sphere emitted a wave of energy that rippled outward, striking the drone mid-air. Its weapons shorted out, and it crashed to the ground in a heap of sparking metal. The remaining drones faltered, their movements becoming erratic. One by one, they dropped to the ground, lifeless. Jason stood, staring in awe as the energy around Alara dissipated. She swayed slightly, and he rushed to her side. "Alara! Are you okay?" She nodded weakly, a faint smile on her lips. "Told you. We'd figure it out." Jason caught her as she started to collapse, holding her steady. "Yeah, but next time let's figure it out without nearly dying." Her smile widened, despite her exhaustion. "You're learning." Jason laughed, relief washing over him as the estate fell silent. For now, at least, they'd survived. But as he looked at the sphere in her hands, he knew their fight was far from over. Jason helped Alara into the estate's main hall, her steps unsteady as the after-effects of using the sphere's power lingered. He set her down on a cushioned bench and paced nervously, glancing at the sphere now resting on the table between them. "That thing," he said, pointing at it, "is either the best weapon we have or the fastest way to get ourselves killed." Alara smirked faintly, though her face was pale. "It's both. Depends on how we use it." Jason stopped pacing, turning to face her. "Okay, time out. What was that? You looked like, I don't know, a walking EMP. And how did you even know what to do with it?" Alara hesitated, her fingers brushing the sphere's smooth surface. "I didn't know. Not entirely. When you brought it back, it spoke to me. Not with words, but through memories. I think your uncle designed it to work with me, or someone like me. Jason frowned, sitting beside her. You mean like your creators? Her expression hardened. No. My creators wanted weapons, tools. This, she gestured to the sphere, is different. It's protective. It's like your uncle knew what I was and wanted to give me a choice. Jason studied her, the weight of her words sinking. And so, what? You think he was planning for this for us to work together? Alara met his gaze, and for a moment, the wall she always kept between them seemed to lower. I think he believed in second chances. For you, for me, maybe even for the galaxy. Jason ran a hand through his hair, trying to process it all. Well, if that's true, we've got a hell of a legacy to live up to. Alara chuckled softly. You're not exactly the poster child for galactic heroism. Hey! Jason protested, though he couldn't help grinning. I just risked my life to grab that thing. If that doesn't scream hero material, I don't know what does. She tilted her head, her smile growing. You're brave, I'll give you that. Reckless too, but maybe that's exactly what we need. Jason's grin faded slightly, replaced by something softer. I don't think I've ever heard you give me an actual compliment before. Should I be worried? Alara rolled her eyes but didn't pull away when he leaned a little closer. Don't get used to it. Noted, he said, his voice quieter. Now. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of everything they'd just survived hanging between them. Finally, Alara broke the silence. The Syndicate won't stop. What we did today, it's only the beginning. They'll send more, and next time we might not be so lucky. Jason nodded, his jaw tightening. Then we'll figure out how to beat them. Together. She raised an eyebrow. You're awfully confident for someone who can't aim a blaster. He smirked. Give me a few days. I'll be a pro. Alara shook her head, but there was a warmth in her gaze now, something closer to trust. We'll see. Jason stood, picking up the sphere carefully. All right, Commander, what's next? Do we train? Fortify the estate? Call in some backup? Alara leaned back, closing her eyes briefly. First, we rest. Then, we figure out what your uncle left us and how to use it. The estate is only one piece of the puzzle. Jason nodded, though his mind was already racing. Rest sounded good, but the fire inside him, new, raw, and growing stronger with each challenge, wouldn't let him sit idle for long. As he turned to leave the room, Alara's voice stopped him. Jason. He turned back, surprised to see her standing now. Despite her exhaustion. Thank you, she said, her tone sincere. For not giving up, for coming back. Jason's throat tightened, but he managed a grin. Hey, what kind of reckless hero would I be if I bailed on my partner? Her smile was small but genuine, and for the first time Jason felt like they weren't just surviving together. They were building something, a chance, a hope, maybe even a future. And for the first time, he wasn't just some guy caught in the middle of a galactic mess. He was part of something bigger, someone who mattered. The estate was quiet now, a calm that felt almost surreal after the chaos. Jason sat at a long table, the sphere resting before him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Alara, despite the earlier exhaustion, stood by the windows, her silhouette framed by the faint light of the twin moons outside. All right, Alara, Jason said, tapping the sphere with his fingers. What's the play? We've got the weapon. The Syndicate's on the hunt, and I'm still trying to figure out why we're even involved in this. I mean, I didn't exactly sign up for intergalactic warfare. Alara turned slowly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. You didn't sign up for any of this. But you're here now, and there's no going back. The Syndicate doesn't care about your personal choices. They'll chase you, me, anyone who stands in their way. Jason sighed, rubbing his eyes. I get it. It's just, This is a lot. One minute I'm trying to sell my uncle's estate, the next I'm running for my life from some creepy alien drones and holding the key to, I don't even know what. Alara's gaze softened slightly. Your uncle wasn't just some estate owner. He was part of a larger resistance. The Syndicate's control over the galaxy runs deep. What we have here, she gestured to the sphere, is something they want. Something they'll stop at nothing to take. Jason leaned back in his chair, staring at the sphere. And if we don't let them take it? Alara's smile was small but resolute. Then we fight. We make sure they regret it. Jason nodded. Slowly, the weight of her words settling over him. This wasn't just about his uncle's estate or his inheritance. It was about something much bigger. And somehow he'd been dragged into the middle of it. So what now? He asked. We just start fighting? We need a plan. Alara's eyes flashed. We don't have time for a full plan, but we do have the sphere, and we know it's tied to something your uncle was working on. I think there's more to it than just being a weapon. We need to find out how it works, what it really does, and how we can use it against the Syndicate. Jason leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. You think the sphere's got a hidden power or something? Like a big surprise waiting to be unleashed? Alara's expression darkened. I don't know, but I've felt it. When I used it earlier, it connected with me. It's not just tech. There's something personal about it. Something about me. Jason met her gaze, a knot forming in his stomach. What do you mean? I don't know, Alara repeated, her voice low. But I think it has something to do with why the Syndicate wants me. Why they've been hunting me for so long. Jason stood up, walking over to her. You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. Whatever it is, whatever they want from you, we're going to stop them. Alara didn't respond immediately, but her posture softened. You've got no idea what you're getting into. I know, Jason said, a slight smile tugging at his lips. But I'm all in. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their words hanging between them. The night outside was quiet, but Jason knew it wouldn't last. The Syndicate would come, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. First thing tomorrow, Alara said, her voice steady. We start investigating. We figure out how to unlock whatever secrets are hidden in that sphere. It's not just a weapon, it's the key to everything. Jason nodded, his mind already racing. All right, let's do this. But as he turned to leave, something inside him stirred. It wasn't just the drive to survive anymore. It was something deeper, a connection to Alara, a shared sense of purpose. They weren't just two people trying to stay alive, they were in this together. And for the first time, Jason felt like he wasn't just caught in a storm, he was ready to fight it. The next morning, Jason and Alara gathered their supplies, preparing to leave the estate behind. They couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. The Syndicate would be coming soon, and every second counted. Jason packed a small bag, tossing in weapons, food, and a few tools he thought they might need. Alara stood by the door, waiting for him to finish. You ready? She asked, her tone calm but expectant. Jason nodded, slinging the bag over his shoulder. Yeah, let's see what's waiting for us. Alara gave him a sharp look. This isn't going to be easy. There's a lot we don't know, and the Syndicate is ruthless. I know, Jason said, the weight of her words sinking in. But it's not about easy anymore. It's about doing what's right. She didn't reply immediately, but her eyes softened. For the first time since they'd met, Jason could sense her trust in him, maybe even a little respect. Let's go, Alara said quietly, stepping out into the cold morning light. Together, they walked away from the estate, their future uncertain, but their resolve stronger than ever. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but they weren't running anymore. They were ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead was long and treacherous, but Jason had no illusions about what lay in wait. They traveled through desolate wastelands, abandoned cities, and hostile territories, each step bringing them closer to uncovering the mystery of the sphere. Jason kept his eyes on the horizon, his mind constantly ticking through plans and contingencies. But no matter how much he tried to prepare, he knew the unexpected would always catch them off guard. Alara, ever the enigma, seemed to glide through it all, her movements fluid and purposeful. She was a force of nature, but even Jason could sense the toll it took on her. The energy she used from the sphere, whatever it was, had drained her, more than she let on. Still, she kept going, one foot in front of the other, never showing weakness. Jason finally broke the silence. "Alara, you've been carrying us through this whole thing. How are you holding up?" She didn't look at him. Her gaze locked ahead, but her voice was steady. "I'm fine." Jason frowned. "That's what you said last time." "I said I was fine," she corrected. "There's a difference." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Sure. Fine means you're just about to collapse from exhaustion, right?" Alara's lips twitched, but she didn't respond. "You know, for someone who doesn't want to show weakness, you sure do keep pushing yourself," Jason pressed, matching her pace. "You can't keep going at this rate. Eventually, you'll burn out." Alara shot him a look, her eyes hard and unreadable. "I'm not like you, Jason. I don't get tired the same way. I'm built differently." "That's the problem," he said, slowing to a stop. "You're not a machine, Alara. You're a person. You've been through more than anyone should ever have to handle. And I'm starting to think you're carrying a lot of baggage you won't even talk about." She hesitated, her jaw tightening, before she spoke. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," Jason said quietly. "It's concern. I'm not saying you're weak. I'm saying we're in this together. You don't have to do everything on your own." For the first time, Alara let her guard slip slightly. She looked at him, her gaze softer than before. "You really don't get it, do you?" Jason took a step closer. "Maybe I don't, but I want to. And I think, deep down, you do too." She looked away, her expression distant. "I can't afford to be soft. Not now. Not after everything I've done. Everything they've done to me." Jason's voice was steady but gentle. "And that's exactly why you don't have to carry it alone anymore. I'm here. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." The air between them thickened, as if Alara was weighing his words, but finally she let out a deep breath. "You don't know what it's like to be hunted for your entire existence, to be used as a weapon, not a person." Jason swallowed, his heart aching for her. "No, I don't. But I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong, to be thrust into something you never asked for. We're not that different, you and I." Alara met his gaze then, her eyes no longer filled with the usual walls, but with something more raw, more vulnerable. For a brief, fleeting moment, they stood there, just two people caught in a storm, finding solace in their shared understanding. But before Jason could say anything more, a loud crackling sound echoed from the comms device strapped to his arm. He snapped his attention to it, his heartbeat picking up. "It's coming from the east," Alara said, already pulling her blaster from its holster. "They're here." Jason cursed under his breath and grabbed his own weapon. Didn't think it would take them this long. Looks like the syndicates finally caught up. The sound of approaching engines filled the air, and soon, several armored vehicles emerged from the clouds of dust that whipped around the wasteland. Jason could see the unmistakable insignia of the Syndicate on the side of each one, their presence suffocating in its certainty. "You ready for this?" Jason asked, turning to Alara. She didn't answer immediately, her hand tightening around her weapon. "I've been ready for this my whole life." With that, they took their positions, hiding behind the wreckage of a nearby building. Jason's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline surging through him. The moment they stepped into the open, they'd be targets, but they had no choice. Alara moved with practiced precision, positioning herself with the kind of cold calculation Jason had come to expect from her. She'd been training for this all her life. Jason took a deep breath. He wasn't a trained soldier. He didn't have her experience, but he had something else. He had her trust, and together, they'd figure this out. The sound of boots crunching on the gravel approached. Jason held his breath as he peeked around the corner of the building, scanning the landscape for the first signs of their enemies. There, a small squad of Syndicate soldiers, their weapons raised and eyes scanning the area. Jason's stomach twisted, but Alara moved first. She popped out from her cover and fired, her aim true as one of the soldiers crumpled to the ground. Jason didn't hesitate. He followed suit, using the element of surprise to his advantage, dropping 2 more enemies before they even had a chance to react. But they weren't alone. From behind the vehicles, more soldiers emerged, heavy artillery in tow. This wasn't going to be easy. "Jason!" Alara called, her voice commanding, "Take cover! They've got reinforcements!" Jason ducked back behind the wreckage, his heart pounding in his ears. "What do we do now?" "Get to the high ground," she ordered. "We'll have a better angle." Jason nodded, already moving to comply. But before he could take another step, a sharp, searing pain shot through his side. He gasped, his hand instinctively clutching his wound as blood began to seep between his fingers. "Jason!" Alara's voice cracked with urgency. "Stay with me!" Jason's vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt the weight of everything pressing in on him. Alara, the sphere, the Syndicate. It all felt so far away, but he couldn't afford to go down now. Not when they were so close. With Alara's support, he pushed through the pain and followed her to higher ground, his weapon still clutched tightly in his hand. The fight wasn't over yet. Jason's vision swam, the pain in his side intensifying with every movement, but Alara was there guiding him, never letting go. Her grip on his arm was like iron, steady and unwavering, and it gave him the strength to keep going. "Don't slow down," she warned, her voice sharp and focused as she helped him climb the rocky incline to the higher ground. "We're almost there. Stay with me." Every step felt like a battle, but Jason kept his eyes on the horizon, knowing that if he slowed down, he'd become an easy target. The Syndicate soldiers weren't far behind, and they were relentless. As they reached the top, Alara pushed Jason into cover behind a jagged outcrop of rock. She crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the battlefield with surgical precision. The sound of gunfire echoed in the distance, but Alara was calm, calculating. Jason gritted his teeth as he tried to steady his breathing, the world around him starting to tilt. "Alara, I don't know how much longer I can—" "Don't," she snapped, her voice softer but urgent. "No time for weakness. Not now." Jason tried to nod, even though every part of him screamed to rest, to give in to the pain. But he knew she was right. The moment they showed any sign of vulnerability, they'd be finished. Alara reached into her pack, pulling out a small metallic device. She handed it to Jason, her eyes never leaving the battlefield. "Activate this when I give the signal," she said, her tone calm but laced with something else, something Jason couldn't quite place. "It'll disrupt their comms. We'll have a few moments of chaos to make our move." Jason took the device, his fingers shaking, and nodded. "Got it. What about you?" She flashed him a quick grin. "I'll keep them distracted. You just worry about getting that thing to work." Before he could protest, she was gone, moving like a shadow across the rocky terrain, darting from cover to cover with a deadly grace. Jason watched her for a moment, then turned his attention to the device in his hand. It was small, sleek, and unassuming, but he could feel the weight of its potential. The moment he activated it, everything could change. The wind howled across the battlefield, kicking up dust and debris as Alara took her position. Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't afford to hesitate. He pressed the button. The comms device emitted a high-pitched whine, and suddenly, everything fell into chaos. The Syndicate soldiers paused, disoriented, as their communications were scrambled. Shouts and commands came through their earpieces, but none of it made sense. Jason's heart raced as the opportunity opened up. Now, Alara. She didn't hesitate, sprinting forward with a speed that almost seemed inhuman. She opened fire, taking down another soldier with precision, and then quickly ducked behind a rock formation to reload. Jason followed her lead, shooting at any soldier who came into his line of sight, but he was careful to stay low, using the terrain to his advantage. His wound throbbed, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins kept him focused. The Syndicate soldiers, now disoriented and panicked, tried to regroup, but they were no match for the precision and coordination that Alara brought to the fight. For a moment, it felt like they had the upper hand, but Jason knew it was only temporary. They couldn't afford to keep fighting like this. They needed to end it, now. "Alara," Jason called out, his voice strained. "We need to finish this." Alara's eyes locked onto him, her expression hard. "I know. Just keep them off me." Jason nodded and moved into position, keeping watch as Alara began to move toward the lead vehicle. It was heavily armored, but if they could disable it, it would buy them enough time to escape. Alara reached the vehicle's side, planting explosives with swift, practiced movements. Jason's heart raced as he saw the timer counting down. He had no idea if the explosives would be enough, but it was their only shot. A loud bang echoed across the battlefield as the vehicle exploded, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. The blast knocked several of the Syndicate soldiers off their feet, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze, but only for a moment. The remaining soldiers quickly recovered, their eyes narrowed with fury. Jason and Alara were exposed. There was no way out unless they made a bold move. "Go!" Alara shouted, her voice urgent. "We can't stay here!" Jason didn't hesitate. He followed her as she sprinted toward the edge of the battlefield, firing off shots to keep the soldiers at bay. The dust and debris from the explosion hung in the air, obscuring their movements. But Jason could hear the pounding of boots closing in behind them. They were running out of time. Alara reached a small cliffside, and without looking back, she scaled it with fluid ease, her movements swift and practiced. Jason followed, his breath coming in sharp gasps as the pain in his side flared again. But he couldn't stop. Not now. They reached the top, and Alara pulled out a small device, pressing a button. A small, sleek shuttle appeared on the horizon, its engines humming as it began its descent. Jason's heart lifted, but they weren't out of the woods yet. They had to make it to the shuttle before the Syndicate's reinforcements arrived. "Move!" Alara urged, already running toward the shuttle. Jason pushed himself harder, the pain in his side becoming almost unbearable, but he ignored it. He had to keep up. They reached the shuttle just as the first of the Syndicate soldiers reached the base of the cliff. Jason and Alara climbed aboard, and the shuttle's doors slammed shut behind them. As the shuttle lifted off, Jason collapsed into a seat, panting. His wound was still bleeding, and he felt like he might pass out any second. But Alara was beside him, her face a mask of concentration. She was already plotting their next move, and Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. "You okay?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Jason nodded, though his head was spinning. "I will be." For a moment, they both sat in silence, the hum of the shuttle's engines the only sound between them. But Jason could feel it, the connection between them. the bond that had formed in the heat of battle. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something bigger. And no matter what the Syndicate threw at them, Jason knew they wouldn't stop until they found the truth, and until they finally brought an end to the war that had followed them for so long. "Let's finish this," Jason muttered, his voice low but filled with conviction. Alara glanced at him, her expression unreadable, but then she nodded. "Together," she said quietly. And in that moment, Jason knew they were unstoppable. The shuttle soared through the atmosphere, leaving the chaos behind, but Jason's mind raced. Despite the temporary reprieve, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being hunted. It wasn't just the Syndicate. There was something bigger at play, something he couldn't quite place. Alara had always been one step ahead, and yet even she seemed to be in the dark about the true scope of the danger they were facing. Alara sat next to him, her gaze fixed on the stars outside the shuttle's viewport. She didn't speak, her thoughts clearly far away, her focus narrowing. To whatever lay ahead, Jason wanted to say something, to ask about the sphere, to demand answers. But he knew better. She would tell him when she was ready, or not at all. His hand instinctively moved to his side, where the wound still throbbed. He was grateful for the distraction of the pain, because it kept his thoughts from drifting too far. Alara had saved him more times than he could count, but he wasn't sure how much longer she could keep going at this pace. "Alara," he said, breaking the silence. "You never said how you got caught in all this." She didn't flinch at the question. Her expression remained unreadable, though he caught the briefest flicker in her eyes, a shadow of something old and painful. "Does it matter?" Jason's voice softened. "It matters to me. You've been carrying this alone for so long. I don't think it has to be that way anymore." Alara's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, Jason thought she would shut him down entirely. But then, to his surprise, she spoke, her voice low and raw. "Not everyone is meant to have a happy ending, Jason. Some of us, we don't get the luxury of choosing what happens to us." Jason tilted his head, trying to understand. "What do you mean?" She paused, her eyes searching the stars outside, as if the answers were written there. "I was born into this. My people, they've been hunted for generations, used as weapons, slaves. It's all I've ever known, and I thought for a while that if I could just keep running, if I could just protect myself, I could escape. But it doesn't work that way. The past is always right behind you." Jason's heart ached for her, the weight of her words sinking in. "You don't have to run anymore, Alara. You've got a choice now." She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "You don't understand. The sphere, it's not just a weapon. It's a part of me. I've lived with it for as long as I can remember. But the moment I tried to take control, it started to control me." Jason leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. "Then we figure it out together. You don't have to face this alone." Alara finally turned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You really think you can handle this? That you can carry all of this with me?" Jason swallowed, his chest tightening. I think we're stronger together. We've made it this far, haven't we?" For a long moment, Alara said nothing. Then, to his surprise, she let out a quiet laugh, a sound that was both bitter and genuine. "You're unbelievable," she said, shaking her head. "I've been running from this my entire life, and you think we can just fix it by holding hands and hoping for the best?" Jason didn't flinch. "I never said it would be easy, but I'm not giving up on you. Not now. Not ever." Her gaze softened, and she exhaled a shaky breath. For the first time, Jason saw a flicker of something resembling hope in her eyes, though it was quickly masked by the usual walls she had built around herself. "We'll see," she murmured, though there was no conviction in her voice. Jason nodded, but deep down he knew she wasn't as certain as she led on. Before he could speak again, the shuttle's warning system beeped, a shrill, jarring noise that snapped both of them to attention. Alara's posture stiffened immediately, her hand reaching for her blaster. Jason followed her lead, his pulse quickening as he glanced at the console. A red blip appeared on the navigation system, growing larger with every passing second. "We've got company," Alara said, her voice all business now. "The Syndicate's not done with us yet." Jason's stomach twisted. They had barely managed to escape the last attack, and now they were about to face another. His hand hovered over his weapon, his mind racing through possibilities, but none of them seemed good. "How much time do we have?" he asked, his voice tight. Alara's eyes flicked to the readout. "Not much. They've already locked onto us. If we don't make a move now, we'll be sitting ducks." Jason glanced at her, his expression determined. "Then let's make sure they regret coming after us." With that, Alara engaged the shuttle's thrusters, veering sharply to the left to avoid the incoming fire. Jason braced himself against the seat as the shuttle lurched, the sound of blaster fire crackling in the air around them. Alara's hands were steady as she guided the shuttle into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding the enemy's laser blasts. She was a master at flying under pressure, but Jason could see the toll it was taking on her. The sphere's influence was wearing her down, and he could feel it too, the weight of the battle dragging them both down. "We need to get to higher ground," Alara said, her voice focused. "I'll take us there, but I need you to be ready. The second we land, we make our move." Jason nodded, his hand gripping his blaster tightly. They had no other choice now. If they didn't end this, the Syndicate would keep coming until there was nothing left of them. With a final burst of speed, Alara banked the shuttle upward, its engines roaring as they ascended toward the cliffside. Jason could see the enemy shuttle closing in, but they were almost there. Just a few more seconds. Then, with a deafening crash, the shuttle slammed into the cliff's edge, throwing Jason forward against his seatbelt. He groaned, blinking away the dizziness. "Get ready!" Alara shouted, already unbuckling herself and reaching for the door. Jason followed suit, his pulse racing as the door to the shuttle opened, revealing the sheer drop below them. They had no choice now but to face their enemies head-on. Together. Jason looked at Alara, her expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes now, a shared determination. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. Jason nodded. "Together." And with that, they leaped into the fray. The fight was brutal. Every move had to be calculated, every shot precise. But for the first time, Jason felt like they had a real chance. They weren't just running anymore. They weren't just trying to survive. They were fighting for something bigger. And no matter how many enemies they faced, no matter how many obstacles stood in their way, they would keep fighting, together, because together they were unstoppable. If you enjoyed this story and want more sci-fi adventures, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts. Who do you think will win the battle next time, Jason or the Syndicate? Your feedback means the world. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes.